welcome to this episode of Star Wars Generations Podcast. Today we are continuing our journey through the Star Wars movies as we talk about the second of the prequels, the fifth movie overall, Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, with myself, Alex Corman, and Erin McGowan. We're going to continue these movies. The current plan is we're going to do this movie, then we're going to do Revenge of the Sith, but then we're not going to do the sequels because, as I'm sure a lot of you are expecting, we are going to be doing episode-by-episode coverage of Bad Batch Season 3. And to help get people ready for it, we're also going to be doing a primer episode on the Bad Batch. And if you're a member of the Ethical Panda Podcast Network, you'll also get our special book club. Exactly. You'll also get our special book club episode on a particular novel that is, we have learned, particularly relevant to the plot of Bad Batch Season 3. If you're doing all you can to avoid spoilers, I wish you all the luck in the world, and I won't mention it for you. But I will say, becoming a member is a great way to get bonus content, to get full bonus episodes, to get ad-free episodes, and just to help support the podcast and make it possible for us to do what we do. It's only $5 a month, less than whatever is the current fancy coffee drink at the place that you're going to, because you're not going to Starbucks because, we're supporting boycotts and all that kind of good things. If you are. If not, fair enough. But all that aside, the point is $5 a month, $55 a year. You can become a member of this podcast and Superhero Ethics, bonus content, ad-free content, and you don't have to hear me talking about this all the time. So, all the benefits. But with that, let's get into the Attack of the Clones movie.
I want to hear you guys go first, actually. Alex, please.
Okay. So if y'all have been following along, this was my lowest ranked Star Wars film when we did our rankings many episodes back. And I'll be honest. Whenever I watch this movie, it is like a roller coaster of emotions. Because there are some parts I really do enjoy. Like, I won't lie to you. Anytime Ewan McGregor's on the screen, I'm having a good time. Yeah. His stuff on Kamino, his interactions with Dooku, the battle on Geonosis at the end. Enjoyable stuff. Now, I am a Hayden Christensen apologist. I love that boy with all my heart. Attack of the Clones is not his finest moment. I want to say that I don't think we can only squarely put it on Hayden Christensen. I think that George Lucas deserves a lion's share of the blame here for some of the direction that went on in this film, some of the writing that was just not good. But when he is on screen with Padmé, I am ready to fall asleep, or I'm just cringing, and for so many reasons. So it feels like a very disjointed movie that has some really high highs and some really low lows. And that's kind of how I feel about it. I think that, it tried. It just didn't always succeed.
That's fair. That's fair. I think the best defense of Hayden Christensen's acting that I can give is that Natalie Portman's performance is also quite bad. And we know she is a very, very good actress. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's a lot more about direction and writing. And I say that as a former Hayden hater who has become a Matt Latner is my Anakin, but Hayden Christensen is fine.
Yeah!
You know what? I would take that as progress and a win.
If you listened to this podcast like 2 years ago, this is huge growth.
This is a big change. This is a big change.
I remember listening to your episodes and being like, God damn, they really hate Hayden Christensen. Like, holy shit.
Now, to be clear, I've never sent him an email. I've never reached out to him. I'm sure, even when I thought he was a horrible actor, I thought he was a lovely human being who deserved none of the hate he got. But moving along, Erin, what's your thoughts on this movie?
Did you do yours?
No.
Please go. I want to go last.
Are you hosting today? Oh. Erin, go ahead. All right, fine. I will go last. I will go next.
Thank you.
I think, Alex, I'm largely with you I think part of why this movie frustrates me so much and why I dislike it so much is that it has the potential to be a phenomenal movie. Mm-hmm. There are some parts of it that, especially when I rewatch it and knowing all the things I know in the Clone Wars, that it sets up brilliantly. Once I know that this was intentional, the amount of hubris that we see from the Jedi in this movie, in everything from oh, no, Dooku could never be behind an assassination. He's too good for that. He's a Jedi. To, just letting Palp suggest Kenobi as the Guardian, to, why Anakin's raging feelings aren't a red flag to everyone who comes in contact with him. Like, it is set up so well. Putting aside what happens a few minutes later, Dooku's speech to Kenobi, which is, by the way, 100% true. Kenobi, there's a dark Sith Lord at the heart of the Senate. True. They're corrupting the Senate. True. Like, it's a perfect lie hidden within a truth. And if this had been, the romance was god-awful and cringy and at times, like, really problematic. I liked a lot of Obi-Wan on screen, but so much of the stuff with the Kaminoans makes no sense whatsoever. I want to encourage other people to deposit their money at the Bank of Kaminoa. Because apparently if I just have a robe the same color as someone who, like, deposited there, I can make a withdrawal. Because they have no security systems whatsoever. But, like, there was so much of the political stuff that I was frustrated was done so badly in the last one was done really well in this. Until they threw it all out the window. And we've got a really cringy romance. And we've got Jar Jar at the heart of a political conspiracy. And we've got a fight scene that should have been really scary, but kept giving us droid slapstick moments. And then we just have... You know what? I'm actually going to do it this way. Erin, you wanted to go last, so I'm actually just going to ask you a question to start out with.
Sure.
As the person who has most recently been a teenager...
Okay.
Let us say that a 16-year-old teenager came to you wanting romantic advice. And this person said that a boy was interested in them, and that the boy had said to them, and I quote, "I'm in agony. The closer I get to you, the worse it gets. The thought of being with you, I can't breathe. I'm haunted by the kiss you never should have given me." What advice would you give to that teenager?
I'd be like, how do you know this guy, for one? For two, are you sure he's not a musical theater major? Because it really feels like it. Like, why is he speaking in Shakespearean? But honestly, like, when I give people advice, I just want to feel out where they're at. So it kind of, guess, depends on where they were coming from. But I'd be like, I don't know, be aware, because that's like a lot of conflicting feelings. It's feeling a little pick-me.
Yeah.
Like,
it's to me, it's a little pick-me. It's a little horribly red flag manipulative gaslighty. The like, you made me feel this way. Anyway, yeah. So that we're gonna have a lot more to say about that particular scene. But Erin, what are your overall thoughts on the movie?
okay. Thank you for letting me go last. I wanted to let y'all run your mouths.
Damn!
So I'm gonna be dead honest with you guys, start to finish. I really liked this movie.
Oh, no.
I enjoyed this movie so much. Like, I know that's hard for you to hear, but, like, I was in it.
That's fine.
Like, all of
That's great.
Geonosius.
Oh, that's great.
I
I'm
was
happy you had a good
excited
time.
about the droid factory, guys. Yeah, I was. I was
awesome.
having a good time.
That's
I
awesome.
support your take. While I might disagree with it, I support you and I'm happy you have that opinion.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've been thinking about this moment all day.
I'm happy that our viewers can't see my face, but I do support you.
I am screen recording, and I will post this.
Oh, I'm so happy. They can see all of my chins as I am complaining in pain. I'm just like pulling into myself. Every part of my body is contorting inward.
We are planning to start streaming this eventually for members. I plan to thoroughly clean my room before we do, because what's behind me in the camera angle looks real bad. So I really hope Erin's kidding there. But who knows? She wants blackmail material. No, that's great. And I am really looking forward to hearing about it. I do think parents, if you are fans of the show and you want your teenagers to become fans of the show, do not send them to Erin for dating advice, because that is a huge red flag that Anakin says. I love the look on her face. It's kind of wonderful.
Rough.
We need to all have someone with a finger on the print screen button from now on, because Erin's face just there was piece resistance. But all right, let's talk about this in a more structured way. What were you feeling as you went into watching this movie?
Alex?
Yeah. So I go into this movie and I think that I think that my two lovely co-hosts would agree with me that I might watch these movies too much even sometimes. But I've seen this movie a lot, but it's probably the one I've seen the least frequently. Just because, like, in my brain, like, you know, it isn't my favorite. But what's interesting, y'all, is when I was a kid, it was one of my favorites. Because as a kid, all the romantic crap went over my head. All I saw was, like, all I cared about was, oh my god, you know, this super cool fight with all the Jedi and all these droids is, like, so cool for a little kid. And I thought that, and I know Matthew doesn't like this line, but as a kid, I thought the line when Obi-Wan said, "You don't want to sell me death sticks," that whole little bit, I thought was the funniest thing that's ever been on the screen of a movie in the history of the world. I thought the chase with Zam Wesell was so fun. Like as a kid, I don't know what, but maybe it's just the visuals of it all and being, like, little and ignoring a lot of the weird, awful dialogue. It was a fun movie. It was just an enjoyable film. Yeah. So when I go into it, part of me is, like, trying to recapture it, but it's also kind of hard for me to fully recapture that when those moments of joy are kind of broken up by the I'm going to be generous and say the iffy at best dialogue.
And to be clear, I laughed as well at the death stick line. It's not that I think it is a fine scene in the movie. I think it shows that Obi-Wan is a fundamentally unethical, manipulative bastard, and he shouldn't have done it.
I disagree with that firmly.
We'll get to that. You must also like Professor X then, because we did a whole episode on how mind-controlling people to do good things is not acceptable.
I don't like Professor X, but I don't think that Obi-Wan doing that once or twice is a total shot at his character. Professor X makes his entire living doing that.
He did it so casually that I feel like it happens a lot. But
we'll talk about it.
We're going to get off this tangent. Erin, what about you?
Yeah, going into it, I'm going to be honest. So, PSA, if you guys haven't noticed online, I'm dead. I'm taking some very hard classes right now. I'm working a lot. And so I was kind of like, shit, like, I don't have time to watch this movie, but, like, I'll make it work, you know, I'll fit it in. And I was watching it last night when I was doing my homework, and I was, like, actually very interested.
Cool.
I was like, oh. So, like, going into it, I guess I wasn't expecting that much. And maybe that's why I enjoyed it so much, just, like, thoroughly. Because, like, in my head, I already know everything that's bad. So I can kind of, like, put that aside and try to enjoy it from, like, my childhood point of view again. Like, yeah, I know this, like, dialogue is shitty, but, like, if you put that aside, like, when I was a kid, like, that's how I thought romance would be. You know? Like, oh my God, I am in agony, like, I can't be with you, we're gonna live a lie, it will destroy us, we're about to be destroyed anyways. Like, all this drama, I was like, yes! It's a bit of a hard watch, but I did enjoy the film, yeah. What were you thinking, Matthew, on the way in?
First, you've given me a very good question to ask someone on a first date. Did you really like this movie when you were a kid? If so, we've got some problems. I'm going to stop bashing on Erin liking the romance now. I'm sorry. It's just too easy. So I was dreading it. I was really not looking forward to it. And I enjoyed it a lot more than I have other times. I think in part because of exactly what you were saying, because, like, I wasn't just letting the bad dialogue roll off me. Like, first of all, the first, I think, 5 or 10 minutes are really interesting and are really well done, I think. It sets up the political drama really well. It fails to answer or even ask one essential question that becomes much worse by the time it's not answered by the end of the movie, which I'll get to in a bit. And then when we got to the first line of awful dialogue, or the first thing that made no sense, I was like, aha, got one. And I wrote it down to take notes. And, like... So it was kind of like half enjoy watching, half hate watching, which was actually a really enjoyable experience. And I made a joke earlier that this was the last time I'm going to watch this movie. The thing is, that's not true, because I probably go back and watch it every couple of years, because I do think that it is a movie that has been made significantly better by the Clone Wars, by every novel that references it. And so every time one of those comes out, I want to go back and watch it again and be like, oh, okay, this scene makes more sense. This scene makes more sense. With, again, like, just fast forwarding through the awful romance bits and the bad dialogue. And even here, I think it's really, really important, and something I try hard to do, and I want Star Wars fans to always call me out, you two included, if I fail in this. I think it's really important to name the difference between what you don't like and what makes something a bad movie. Mm-hmm. I have feelings on what for kids meant in the 70s and 80s and what it meant in the 90s and 2000s, and do feel like it has been dumbed down somewhat. But it's easy for me to say that because I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, and then I wasn't in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah.
And for me, if there's a scene like the droid scene where I think, to me, the silliness of C-3PO pulls me out of it, but you two just love it and flat out love it as a scene, then that scene did what it was supposed to do. It wasn't for me. But then I can't say that scene makes it a bad movie because I think it makes it a movie that kids can really enjoy, which is a good thing. Go ahead.
Sorry. I just want to say that I won't lie, Matthew, after, and for our members who will listen to a little bit afterwards, reading the short story today that we're going to talk about in the member section, it made me more okay with 3PO and R2-D2 in this movie.
Oh, I'm interested to see how you put that together.
Yeah, I think I know where you're going with that. I will say that I feel like there were some questions we left unanswered in our coverage of Phantom Menace about Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan's respective responsibility for the fall of Anakin, and that story, I think, addressed it really, really well.
Perfect. I was like, wow, I wish we had actually done this last week.
Right? Exactly. But yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
So no, you're fine. I think that's what I was going to say. This is why I want to do this podcast, because I want to hear what are the things you guys like about it and be able to see it from different eyes and different perspectives.
Yeah.
Let me therefore ask a question that this is the question that I think the movie never addresses and should have, and I think therefore is a blinding problem with it, but maybe I'm missing something. The Republic has problems. We all know that. There's corruption. It's inefficient. It's unable to get things settled. A number of parts of the Republic that have their own governments and the like say, we don't want to be part of the Republic anymore. Why is that a bad thing?
Because the Republic has stood for so many thousands of years with no war.
And?
Exactly. It's not set up in a way that explains that. You're right. It's not really answered in this movie other than the idea of, keeping one galactical power, which, I mean, here on Earth, we can't do that, and that's just, one planet.
Right.
It's not a realistic political system.
Yeah. And, I think they're clearly using the iconography of our own American Civil War. They call them the Separatists. They specifically say the Grand Army of the Republic, which is the exact phrase that was used in the Civil War. There's a lot of these other things. And we know that slavery exists in lots of the Republic, in lots of parts of the outer rims of the Republic, and that a lot of the people who are breaking away support. And part of me wonders if in the original script it was going to be more about slavery and be a direct analog for our Civil War. And I wonder if maybe that got cut out because people were like, yeah, we don't want people in Alabama to storm the theaters or whatever it's going to be.
Oh.
No insult to people in Alabama. I'm just saying 20 years ago, especially,
Yeah. I see where you're coming from.
It's an interesting question because I honestly go back and forth on which side is. I don't know if it's a right side in, if you, it's hard to remove them. If you remove Palpatine's plot from it all,
mm-hmm.
The Separatists have some very good points that even without Palpatine, corporations and corruption exists in the Senate. There's a lot of issues that exist in the Republic, and we see how the Separatist Council functions in an episode of the Clone Wars TV show, and a lot of the Separatists genuinely want peace. They don't want war. They believe in a lot of the ideals that Count Dooku spits out. And honestly, again, putting aside, and it's hard to separate them, his Sith Lordness, a lot of the points Dooku makes in his disillusionment with the Council and the Republic are very real and very valid. And, I think that the only argument that I could possibly think about is the one that, and again, if you're relating it back to the American Civil War, is that Lincoln kind of made, and that, divided, the Republic is very weak, and or the Republic of the U.S. would be very weak, and you would naturally have more fights, and a war would break out, and that I don't think that either side would accept for a long period of time the existence of the other side, specifically the Republic not accepting the existence of the Separatists. The Separatists just want to be acknowledged as an equal entity.
Right.
And so, I don't know, I think that the only argument is that, they don't want there to be the potential for war, the potential for fighting, the potential to have trade disputes within one galaxy. And there's not really, we haven't explored at least foreign, they explored in the books, but like foreign enemies. There are foreign enemies that exist outside the galaxy, but they're not really an active threat that the whole galaxy would need to band together against. So, I don't know. I might even be on the side that the Separatists were kind of right, so.
Valid.
What's your take, Erin?
Sorry, I have that three for a loop there, Erin.
I just don't have thoughts. I don't know.
That's fair.
My mind went blank.
That's fair.
Are you for the Republic?
For the Republic!
I'm for the clone.
I yell that out all the time. So I'm currently reading The Dark Disciple, which I haven't actually gotten to read in the past, and it's actually giving me a little more pause on the war in that, like, Dooku makes this really strong point and can use this towards the masses in that the clones are living creatures, living beings that are being sent out to war. The Separatists are sending out droids or volunteer soldiers. The clones don't have an ability to volunteer. And to me, that made me just think about the war differently and maybe think about the whole dynamic of this movie and of just the larger conflict. I'm like, God, it makes it so much more complex because, like, I always consider the clones as these brave, amazing people, but they are forced into service. And, like, I've always considered the fact that they are slaves to the Republic, but I never really considered the fact that on the other side, the droids are not living things and are just being, mass-produced. And when they get killed, the Separatists aren't losing the same amount of life as the Republic is. And I don't know. It makes it much muddier for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is kind of like, if you think about it and look at it, it's like the Separatists are the little guys. Like, in the same way that the Rebellion and the Resistance were,
Yeah.
They're the ones who don't just have a giant mass of, like, faceless, nameless troopers, like, whether they were children kidnapped at birth or people literally grown to fight. Like,
Yeah.
the Separatists are the ones using humane soldiers, low-key.
And I feel like by the time of the Clone Wars and by the time of the books that come after, someone in Lucasfilm realized this was a problem. Because the Clone Wars, the show, does a lot more to say that these people are claiming they're leaving because of the corruption, but really the people who are leaving are the corrupt ones who want to leave so they can do more corruption. And, like, the books show that out even more. But yeah, even there again, and I don't know if it's that they wrote this without really thinking that they would need to justify it, or if they actually wanted it to appear unjustified, but then thought that was a little bit too morally gray. Because I'll throw out one even more, because I'm paying attention to this now. Let's say a bunch of you are hanging out, like, in your bunks at a big factory where a lot of stuff's happening. And some strange guy who's not from your planet comes in looking sus as hell, trying to get into your factory. And so you come out of your bunks and are like, yo, dude, what's going on? And you've got a gun in your hand probably because there's a stranger. And he just starts cutting you down with this laser sword. Like, That's not cool. I felt a lot of sympathy. Granted, part of it's because of what I know happens to the Geonosians in later works. But I wound up feeling very sympathetic to the Geonosians. Like, they have the death penalty, and the death penalty sucks, even if they're really bad at doing it. But yeah, I was just like, dude, Anakin, like, say hello. Don't be like, oh, you're coming out of your thing to say hello to me and ask me what the fuck I'm doing here. I'm going to cut you all down and just go to war.
Yeah. That's not something I thought about, because as a kid, my favorite arc of the Clone Wars was the Geonosius brainworms, in which the mindset is just cut the bugs down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, the whole Geonosius, or Geonosian arc, there we go, is like, they're just so vilified. And, like, that's also part of the problem, is, like, these are the native people of the planet, and you're invading a facility that belongs to them. So, like, yeah, they're gonna come at you, but, like, you don't know the plot. You just know Obi-Wan is somewhere on this planet being held captive.
Right.
But it's very Anakin of him, It's like, oh, there's all these people suddenly? Kill them. The men, the women, and the children, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, well, Anakin did know they were building something.
That's true.
And like, I think just a slight defense. I think he knew that there was something really sus. He probably could sense the bad stuff going on. But I agree in that, like, I mean, I also think, Matthew, that Star Wars is nothing if not morally gray.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So.
And I think it is often morally gray intentionally, and sometimes it doesn't quite know what it's doing. It tries to be morally black and white, and it fails. And I think it's what's frustrating with this movie is it feels very confused. Because you have Dooku as this perfect, like, what do you do? Like, it's the Killmonger Magneto moment of what do you do when the villain has a point, but the villain's willing to do terrible things to defend their point. But then, oh, wait, no, he's not actually a good guy who's gone wrong. He's actually just Darth Tyrannus. And
well, it's funny, if I may expand on Dooku for a moment. As a child, Dooku was my least favorite of the Sith Lords. I was always like, Darth Vader's so cool. I thought Darth Maul was menacing. Palpatine was just, evil puppet master. And Dooku to me, as a kid, just was like, here's this old guy who's like super political, and I'm like, he's not around that much in the movies. He's kind of boring. And obviously, like, he's been extremely hashed out through shows and books since then. But now he's one of my favorite because he represents, I think, the true disillusionment. Like, his points of disillusionment with the Jedi are so valid, and like all of his points for leaving the Order initially, I think, are so fair. And like, I think that he can be evil and cold and cruel, but he also just, the way he goes about things is so ingenious. He almost brings like the genius intellect of Palpatine with the forcefulness of Vader, but also a great elegance to him, and just he makes you want to believe him. And I often think about, and this is a little bit of a not on. If you watch the deleted scenes of this movie, there's a scene in the library when Obi-Wan is searching for Kamino basically, and Shakasa New comes up to him, and he's staring at a bust of Dooku. And in the deleted scene, they discuss like the Lost 20, which are like 20 Jedi Masters who have left the Order over its history. Thousands of years this thing has existed, only 20 have really left. And they honor them, basically. The Jedi are like, these are people that disagreed with us and choose to leave. And it just deepens the interest to me around Dooku because, like, he is only one of so few who had the courage and the will to leave this Order on his own terms. And sure, he made some very bad decisions afterwards when it comes to Palpatine and joining the dark side, but a lot of what he has to say is really interesting, and I think his character is amazing. And the last thing I'll say, to Matthew's point in the conversation he has with Obi-Wan, everything he says is true, and so are the emotions he expresses. His sorrow for losing Qui-Gon, that pain is real. His, like, you can see on his face that, like, leaving the Order wasn't, like, easy per se for him, but he feels like it was the right choice, and he stands by it, and I don't know, it's just, he's such an interesting character.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, like, Tales of the Jedi truly reworked my mindset on Dooku. Because, like, for me growing up, it was the Clone Wars. Like, I was almost even too young for the prequels. Like, not really, but Revenge of the Sith came out, like, the year after I was born, or the year I was born, I think. So, like, I watched whatever. Alex was giving me a you're a child
No, I feel
face.
old. I feel old.
Oh, okay. Anyways, so, like, to me, Dooku is always, like, that annoying piece of shit. Like, he's always on it. He's always so haughty and, like, full of himself and stuff. So, like, I never thought deeper. Even when I watched this movie again a while ago, like, just his political machinations, it's like, that whole speech he had to Obi-Wan is like, yeah, that's bullshit. But, like, after Tales of the Jedi, it's like, I see what you guys are talking about now. It's like, no, he did hurt a lot from losing Qui-Gon. He meant it when he said, like, it's unfortunate I haven't met you until now, or something like that. Or, like, I'm pleased to finally meet you. Qui-Gon spoke so highly of you.
Yeah.
Like, he does mean it. And I think to an extent he does mean the part about, oh, this is a mistake. Like, in his eyes, at the time, in my mind, a lot of different perspectives here. But his goal is to kill Padme. That is what he has promised the Trade Federation, is that Padme Amidala will die. Mm-hmm. And here's Obi-Wan, his apprentice's apprentice, and he's like, hey, like, if Qui-Gon saw something as this guy, like, I don't have beef with him, really. Like, I don't have anything against him. Like, but then when Obi-Wan gets kind of, like, aggressive with it and is like, lies, I will never join you, or whatever, like, I think Dooku's kind of like, yep, he's just like the rest, pretty brainwashed, doesn't really want to talk, so, all right.
You know, you're making a great point, and you're helping me make a connection that I never thought about before, which is that, to me, it feels like when he goes to Sidious and says, like, everything's working according to your plan, Master, I'm like, oh, okay, so, like, all that was a lie he said to Kenobi. But I think you're right. I think he means it, and, like, looking at the whole history of the Sith, of course it makes sense. Dooku's goal isn't to go back to Sidious and say, Master, everything worked out. It's to get Obi-Wan as his apprentice so the two of them can go back and kill Sidious in the exact way that the Sith always want to do. Like, oh, that makes it make a lot more sense. And I don't know.
That's actually really interesting. Do you
Right?
think it's because Dooku was so attached to Obi-Wan because he was attached to Qui-Gon?
So, and again, here, my favorite book about Dooku is Darth Plagueis, which I know
so
is
smug.
not canon anymore. What?
Erin looks so smug right now as we're talking about this, Matthew.
No, she's deservedly so. She made a great point. And I was probably far too, like, attacking her about teen romance stuff, so I apologize for that. So I'm glad we're making a good point here. But no, because what Darth Plagueis really makes sense is that Dooku does see this, and I think the Dooku story is one of the perfect illustrations of the path to the dark side, because he is terrified that the Sith are coming back. And he also thinks that the Republic are misusing the Jedi, and that the Jedi should be in control, and that he thinks that too many Jedi are dying. And in Darth Plagueis, it's very clearly Qui-Gon's death that makes him leave. And he has a conversation with Palpatine, where you get the sense he's starting to figure out that Palpatine might be the Sith Lord, but he's starting to be like, you know what? Maybe part of the Jedi failure is that we're not willing to use the dark side. Like, he's not saying, like, the Sith are right, total ambition, screw everybody else. He's saying maybe in order to do what the Jedi are supposed to do, we should use some dark side powers. And by that regard, and granted, I think I'm now way off into headcanon, but maybe this is what Lucas intended, and it was just way too subtle. The story of Dooku never wanted Sidious's plan to work. Dooku wanted to use Sidious, learn as much of the dark side as he could, and then overthrow Sidious so that he could actually just be the most Jedi that's ever Jedi'd and teach the Jedi they should use the dark side. Because, yeah, I think he honestly believes he doesn't want Mace Windu to fight. He hates that all these Jedi just died in that fight. So, yeah.
Matthew, Dooku does try and take on more apprentices than anyone else. I mean, he's like, Qui-Gon should join me. Obi-Wan should join me. He's got
Sifo Dyas.
He's got Ventress. He's got Savage Opress. He's trying to convince. I mean, another individual in some books. You know, he tries to convince so many people to join him to overthrow Palpatine. It's constant. He's trying to find someone new.
So it may be just because of Clone Wars in the books, but I'm now fully accepting of that headcanon, and that does make this movie a lot better. I'll accept that. That does help a lot.
Yeah. It does, like, if you talk through it and rework it, like, Dooku's story can still be redeemed through this movie.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Or his story in this movie can still be redeemed through other media.
Yeah. I can't quite give the movie credit because I wish it had been a little bit more open about that. But yeah, I think we can headcanon it in a way that totally makes sense. Yeah. Let's talk about the Anakin of it all. The face Alex is making. That could best be described as the troubled Kermit face. I'm just putting these in as little, like, teasers to get people really excited to watch the stream. Alex, what's your take on Anakin in this movie?
Okay. I have two parts to this. Part one is I want to, again, blame the writing. Because I do believe, and this might be a little too on the nose for reality, but a lot of times it is the troubled, neglected, white male teenagers who turn into the most problematic people in society. And Anakin fit a lot of those bills. And I think that becoming Darth Vader, him being emotionally stunted, really awkward, angry, angsty, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, in this movie, he's supposed to be, 19? Mm-hmm. I think that direction, the direction of the character, and I think what Hayden's portrayal was, makes sense to me. And I think that it was done as well as it could have been done, or close to it, with the writing and script provided. I don't care if you have won 10 Academy Awards for Best Actor. If someone hands you the line, I hate sand, it's coarse and gets you're just not, no, I don't care who it is, Harrison Ford himself could not act that line well. And I think that hindered his performance. And I think that in Revenge of the Sith, it is much more elevated because I think the writing's better. But I think in this movie, we just get a glimpse of that. Now, just story-wise, Anakin, I think that, it's actually, it's actually kind of decent. I think that, like, seeing Anakin struggle with his romantic feelings, again, writing was not good on that, but the premise of Anakin struggling romantically, seeing why he would give up so much, for, like, the first person that showed him love and compassion and care, told him it was okay when he did something awful, like, I'm not saying that Padmé was right for doing that at all, and there's a lot more going on there under the surface, but I think that this movie really does set up and open up Anakin's fall. Even if it wasn't written or executed as well as it could have been, I think that the premise really was there and does fairly make sense. And I want to point out one little specific note that I never really picked up until this rewatch. He says the exact same words to Padmé, "I would do anything you ask," as he says to Palpatine after he takes off Mace Windu's arm. Palpatine and Padmé are like the two people that I think he reaches his most vulnerable, raw state with.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I would do anything for you. I would do whatever you ask. You have shown me that what I've been craving and needing, that I think Obi-Wan always reserved a certain degree because he didn't want to feed into Anakin's emotions that level. Mm-hmm. Padmé did. And we see, what comes out of it, and we see, like, the monster it eventually creates.
Yeah. The Anakin of it all. So,
the Anakin of the
I
room.
think I'm starting to put together a lot of things in my head as we're talking about this. Because, and this is my life, okay? Mm-hmm. This is not anyone else's experience that I'm going to be speaking on here. But from where I am, growing up pretty conservative, you can't really express emotions like that, Like, if you have a crush on someone, you talk about it with your friends, you never tell them. But, like, maybe you, like, brush against their arm or something like that, Mm-hmm. Or, like, it's the biggest move ever to, like, brush someone's shoulder the way he did Padmé's, Like, that's like, oh, my God, like, we're going to be talking about that for weeks, Like, when they finally kiss, it's like, ooh, like, you use all these big dramatic words to try to talk about how you're feeling because you can't just fuck it out. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just awkward and it's weird and it's hard and, like, that's almost relatable to me. Like, watching that felt like a lot of my, like, middle school, high school relationships, which is gross and weird, but it's just how it was. And maybe that's why it's never been a huge deal to me, because it's like, yeah, like, in my eyes, that's what young love is. Like, that's how it goes, right? Right, guys, right? Nobody agrees. But,
No, I very much agree. And that's part of why
I think
I'm so horrified by it. But that's,
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Is like, it's one of those things where you trauma dump and you're like, that's relatable, right? And everyone's like, no. And I'm like, oh, well, sorry that I thought Anakin and Padmé was, like, normal, because it, looking back, is not. No, yeah. It's weird. It's kind of creepy. Like, the whole her being so much older than him, or at least portrayed so much older in the first movie, and then suddenly we're supposed to just, like, believe that they're on the same level of maturity, like, just doesn't line up. And, like, he is so obviously stunted. Like, he throws temper tantrums all the time, and she just kind of like nods along with it. She's not like, you're acting like a baby. Right. Like, I mean, like a temper tantrum after your mom dies, that's pretty valid. A temper tantrum, I'm talking about when he throws something across the basement in Lars's house. Right. I'm not talking about when he killed a bunch of people.
Okay, so mass murder in response to a traumatic event, but still, mass murder is a red flag when it comes to dating?
Correct.
Okay.
I would say so.
Well, so I feel like the two of you really summed up why I wrestle with this so much. Because to me, like, I think we're all in agreement, it sounds like, then, that at least, like, his behavior is incredibly, it's funny, on a different podcast, I said recently that I do think that one thing that we don't talk about enough, and this is not a defense, and I say this as a person who used to gaslight a lot, especially in romance. Anakin I relate to in awful ways because I was that person as a teenager and probably way too long into a young adult. And I think a lot of times the first person to gaslight or gaslights is themselves. Not a justification in any way, shape, or form, but an explanation. But it helps to understand it better. It helps to stop it. And so to me, when he says that this whole line of, I am in pain that you won't kiss me and you won't love me, and so you should feel responsible for my pain. Particularly when he frames it as, she says she doesn't want to kiss him. He initiates the kiss. She kisses back. And he later frames it as, I'm haunted by the kiss you never should have given me. Like, that's straight up victim blaming and gaslighting in the worst way. Mm-hmm. And what I wrestle with is I don't know if Lucas knew that when he wrote those words. Because I feel like either we're supposed to think it's very romantic, and thus we can understand why Padmé falls for him. Or, and this is kind of, Alex, what you were saying, we're supposed to look at it and think this is a sign of him being basically an incel, at that point in time, which, again, maybe like I'm being too harsh on him because a lot of teenage boys are like that, and I think I was too, but I did not kill anybody when my mother died, certainly.
That's what I'm doing. I didn't commit murder when my dad died. Like I was 7. I was younger than Anakin was.
There we go. But look, here we are just trauma dumping. Like, when our parents died. Right. Okay. Never mind. The point being, I don't know, because I do feel like, as you were just saying, if we are supposed to read this as this is a sign of a boy who has had to repress his emotions all of his life and has no idea how to express them, as a boy who finally feels like he can be vulnerable with someone and admit the pain he's feeling, because no one's ever he's never really thought about someone else's feelings in this regard, because everyone around him has always told him they don't have feelings. So maybe we're supposed to see this as this is a sign of how he falls and how screwed up he is. But then 5 years older than him, has been a queen, has been a senator. How in the world does Padmé fall for it? Especially when, as the internet has put it so well, Daddy-Wan Kenobi is right there.
I have a thought on this.
Go for it.
And I just thought of it now. I don't know how valid it really feels, but when you consider the way we saw, okay, so the only glimpse that we have into like what a royal upbringing kind of looks like is the small glimpse we got in Princess Leia as a kid in the Obi-Wan show. And if it was remotely similar, Padmé's life was very restricted as a child. She grew up, was a freaking queen at how was she in that movie? Like 15?
No, it's 10 years later, and he's 19.
No, I'm sorry. In Phantom Menace, how old is she? Is she a queen at 15?
She's 14.
14, thank you. And I think that she has lived her life very sheltered. She talks about her first kiss was at this retreat for future senators, basically. Like,
yeah,
it's possible that when you live a sheltered life, you finally get to experience your first, like, you're going out on, with this guy who's like, mysterious and unique and powerful, and it's possible that Padmé just fell for this because of the way she was brought up and the fact that she was sheltered from so much of the world that she was like, didn't even consider for a moment that a Jedi who were revered and trained to be the best of us could possibly be in the wrong, could possibly be that far gone. especially one that was trained by Obi-Wan Kenobi and was like, so highly regarded by the council. And it's possible that she fell for him because of a combination of the reputation the Jedi held, the inherent trust that the people had in them, that she would probably instilled in her since birth, and the fact that she was so closed off and sheltered that, I was sheltered as a kid to a certain degree as well, and my first girlfriend was very problematic. Ooh. And I think that, and I know we're not victim blaming Padme at all, but I think it's easy to be like, how could she have fallen for this guy? But I think it's more like Anakin's manipulation, her upbringing in a closed environment, and the inherent trust that you're supposed to have in a Jedi. It's like if superheroes existed. I mean, I know, Matthew, you probably discussed The Boys at some point with people, but it's like you have an inherent trust in superheroes because they're like these supposedly infallible beings. And so Padme's probably like, oh, he messed up once or twice, but Anakin's really good. Like, he really is good inside. And she constantly makes excuses for him throughout the relationship, I think. And I don't know. That's my best rationale.
I'll just say, if you want more, I have done quite a lot of episodes on The Boys, episode by episode coverage. Go to Superhero Ethics, and you'll find it, my other podcast.
It's a great show, too.
Erin, you were going to say?
I was going to say, maybe to an extent, it's like, yeah, the Jedi are these perfect, infallible things. The idea of somebody willing to break that oath for her, means so much. Just the idea of it, regardless of the person. Maybe it gets to her head a little bit, or it's just like, wow, this is so serious for him. I've been in the place before where someone tells you they like you, someone tells you they love you, and you're like, well, I guess I love them.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think that's very fair. I think also when I remember that I think we all agree that if the most romantic line in Star Wars is, I love you, I know, the second most romantic line is, I would have given up the Jedi Order for you, Satine. And that, and also I think there's another rule that I have long stated in terms of giving people advice and these sort of things, that I think there are 3 conditions under which a person saying I love you does not count. If you've just given them amazing food, if you've just given them amazing sex, or if they're about to die. Under any of those 3 conditions, it does, and she's about to have, and yeah, maybe so, she's been thinking, maybe I love him, but maybe he's a mass murderer, and maybe I love him, but maybe he's gaslighting me, but we're about to die. I don't want to, sure, Yeah. And maybe, this is giving way too much credit, but maybe the guy who is supposed to fight to the death to protect me will fight to the death to protect me a little better if he thinks I'm in love. I mean, I don't think that's true, but
Right. And the last little bit I would say on this is I think that it's also possible that the concept, and I think that the concept of a forbidden love, it's taboo. There have been love stories throughout history where, the entire basis of the attraction between 2 people is the fact that it's not supposed to be there.
That's fair.
It's not supposed to happen. And I think that, the fact that Anakin knows he's not supposed to be dating anyone or having this kind of attraction, and Padme knows the same the other way, I think that, whether messed up or not, does lead to a certain, sexual tension that builds up. It's the forbidden fruit that we're going to keep tasting. We keep pushing our limits.
I'll admit that I don't know if I have a good opinion on this because I am bisexual, I'm queer, I've openly talked about that a lot. But for a lot of the time in my college years and afterwards, I was kind of going in and out of the closet, and I was pretty deep in the closet, not convinced myself I was straight again by the time I saw this movie. So maybe I'm not the right one to judge. I think Hayden Christensen is an incredibly attractive man. I think Anakin Skywalker in the 3rd movie is an incredibly attractive man. I think in this, he looks like he hangs out at a gas station all the time and listens to Kid Rock because of his rat tail that I know is supposed to be a Padawan braid. I thought does he look really handsome in this movie?
For me, it's the Padawan braid and the tiny ponytail combination that, puts it over the edge.
I mean...
So into the edge of, yes, he's hot in this, or he's just ridiculous?
No, it's he would have been so hot if you didn't do those things.
Okay, so we can't even say that Padme's...
He's goddess tan in this movie. His skin looks delicious. And the least weird way possible. I want to lick it. I don't know. But other than that, it's
Star Wars
bad.
After Dark, everyone!
That's legit.
I mean, as a straight man, I think Anakin is objectively very hot in Revenge of the Sith and in real life, and I do not feel that way about him in Attack of the Clones. I think that, like, if you took away him speaking, and you just looked at him, and you took away the braid and the ponytail, and you gave him a little better haircut, sure, he could be attractive in this movie too. But the general vibe that was crafted around him was not one that was meant to say, look at this sexy man.
I will also admit my bias in that at the time that I was entering the dating world and still in the at the time that I was entering the dating world and still in my early years in the dating world, and then when this movie came out, which is around that same time, the attraction to the golden retriever boy or the like big cuddly bear dad bod wasn't really a thing. Emo, like we didn't even call it emo yet, it was just goth. But like broody boys was the thing. And I couldn't brood. Every time I tried to brood, I would giggle too much. So, like, there's a part of me that just naturally wants to be like, no, don't be attracted to broody, moody, McMoody pants. Be attracted to the class clown. That's what you really want. So, I'm my own bias there. So, like, hearing this,
But it also, Matthew, it has been. I actually had a great conversation with another friend that I think that TV in general has pushed that broody, dark both ways. And any attraction, whoever you're attracted to, I mean, you think of the Hex Girls, all the goth like femme characters put out there as we were children, like they push the brooding man, woman, any gender in between. Like that is just what, for whatever reason, Disney, Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, Disney, whatever, they wanted kids to grow up being attracted to the dark, brooding character, and I think they have succeeded.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's still a thing then. But at least now the golden retriever holds like equal space with the...
No, for sure.
It's talked about and appreciated.
No,
yeah,
absolutely.
It was not back then. It absolutely was not. All right.
So, do we want to talk about stuff other than the romance?
Yeah.
I do... Well...
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Matthew's like, I don't actually. Thank you for asking me.
I do because Well, actually, no. I want to talk about what I think is Anakin's best moment. And it does touch on the romance because I think it has to be the moment where the romance ends if you're going to hold any respect for Padmé. Which is, if you ask me what is the single moment from the prequels that best illustrates Anakin's fall to the dark side, it's his reaction to losing his mother. Because, in terms of the people who you can justifiably kill, the people who kill the person you love most in the world is going to be pretty high up on that list. I still think it's not justifiable, especially when he kills all the people. But to me, that's an example of how you can have a justifiable feeling of rage and the power of the Force, and it gets away from you. I just hate that Padmé is like, oh, you poor, poor baby. What's your take on that scene? Both in terms of it, like, showing his path to the dark side and in terms of the romance of it.
I mean, in terms of path to the dark side, like, it just makes sense. Like, he's been having nightmares about his mom. And, something about me, if you don't know, I've got nightmares. Like, nightmares. To the point where it's like, I will tell my mom and she will start crying with how disturbing they are. Like, the things that come up in my head. And, like, I really relate to the full torture. Like, no, I'm not sleeping well. I can't stop, like, thinking about this. It's really weighing on me. And, like, the idea of something in my nightmares coming true, I would snap. I would lose it. I would. But, like, I would hope nobody who cares about me in my life would be like, yeah, I understand that, like, your mom died because, like, Chobani had, like, rat poop in their yogurt or something. Like, that's fine that you went and killed all the execs at Chobani. Like, what? Like, I don't know.
Okay. I'm not defending what Anakin did by any means.
Oh, boy.
Just to play devil's advocate for a minute. I ask both of you this question. Just think about the person, it doesn't matter who it is in your life, who you love the most. Whether it's a parent, a partner, a friend, doesn't matter. Just picture that person. Now, I want you to think if you were taken away from them one day, no warning, just taken away from them, and weren't allowed to visit them, weren't allowed to see them. You knew they were alive, but not in a good situation. They were being kept in slavery somewhere. So now you know your friend, your loved one, is enslaved somewhere. Finally, you have a chance to go help them. To find that they were killed by as far as Anakin knows at this point, a gang. We don't know that. I don't think he's aware of the depth of the Tuskens. Do you think you would snap?
Yes. And, therefore, I think that if someone said to me, you have the potential to have godlike powers over life and death and to be one of the best fighters in the world, we are going to give you those powers. By the way, do you have any emotional situation in your life that has the potential to cause you to snap? I would hope to God those people would say, oh, you do? Cool. We're not giving you those powers. We're actually going to do everything we can to help you get past the ability that you wouldn't snap before we put a lightsaber anywhere close to your hands.
Which, to be fair, the Jedi initially did say, we're not going to train you because of that exact reason.
Yep.
We sense that fear in you. Now, they cave too easily, I think, because of Qui-Gon's death. Again, everything goes back to Qui-Gon's death. They cave too easily, I think, because they're like, Obi-Wan is going to do this anyway. I think that, if they had stuck to their guns in this respect, that he wouldn't have, they wouldn't have trained him, because they did sense that. And I think that I am not condoning violence in any way or murder in any way. But I think that if the person I love the most in all this exact situation that Anakin went through, I don't know what I would do. I don't know if I would go into a fit of rage and blind anger and kill gang members that I saw as being evil and violent and, the ones who took everything from me. And then Anakin, it's not just his anger against them. It's his anger against the Council, against Obi-Wan, against everyone, channeling it out in this moment. And there's a part from a Star Wars book where another, a Jedi goes through something similar, basically, and it brings more meaning to the scene for me because of the fact, you can see how if you just taste the dark side, just dip your toe into that anger, into that pain, and you couple it with that just unlimited, sorry for the pun, unlimited power, it becomes so dangerous. It becomes like this, because the thing is, if this happened to me, a mere mortal, I might try and hurt someone, even try and kill someone, but I don't have the powers of a god to just tear down an entire gang like this. I mean, Anakin knows that he's untouchable and that he can do what he wants. And I think that sorry, Siri, my watch is so to me. And I think that just makes it it makes it darker, but it also makes me understand it more of once you lose a little bit of control, you're just gone. I mean, Anakin just lost himself in that moment, and I think that's something that isn't talked about very often because Lucas did nothing to tell us that this is who that was. You actually hear Qui-Gon's voice for a moment, reaching out from the Force in the scene, and he says, "Anakin, Anakin, no!" Trying to tell him to stop, trying to reel him back in, and Anakin is just so blinded by rage he doesn't even hear his former master that he clearly misses trying to stop him.
And I 100% agree with you. I cannot justify Anakin's actions,
Correct.
But I can understand them. And I think that scene is, and I think this movie overall is the answer to the question I had from the original movies that Phantom Menace doesn't really give us of why is it that Obi-Wan feels like he failed? Yeah. Because in this movie, Anakin told Obi-Wan that he still has all these feelings for Padmé. Mm-hmm. Obi-Wan should have never, ever, ever left these two alone. He should have done so much more to help Anakin get past these feelings and and come to some sense of emotional closure with his mother, or maybe even, here's a crazy idea, gone off and rescued his mother. But either way, this is going to be a weird connection, but I promise it makes sense, I hope at least. Both of my parents are lawyers. And so we often watched a lot of law shows growing up, like Law and Order or, LA Law and stuff like that. And I remember early on, I was pretty young, probably like 7 or 8, asking my parents, why is the court, Joe Smith got murdered, So why is the case officially called the people of the state of California against, Bob Jones? I meant that as a generic name, not an actual name, but yeah, you know what I mean? Instead of the family against him. And what they said to me was yeah, we all want revenge, but that's a terrible way to run a society. And the idea is that the city, the state, the people as a whole are hurt and are made less whole by a crime against one of our members, but the state isn't personally angry. And that personal anger should not be the basis of a system of justice, which is also why I think the death penalty is just fundamentally always wrong. But I've always held to that idea, and I think this is a great reason for it. You cannot... What happens to Shmi Skywalker is a horrific crime and should be dealt with, but it cannot be dealt with by the person who is personally invested in it, and the person who's personally invested with it should have never been in a situation where they have the power to do that. And, I wish that more had been said about it, but I do think some of the books later, even the story we're going to talk about in a few moments, definitely gets more into it. But yeah, to me, that's all... I believe it from that's probably one of the most believable moments, even if I do still think Hayden's acting is kind of wooden, but again, bad direction. But to me, it more than anything is that moment combined with the many signs Anakin gives Kenobi that he's not doing okay. It really shows Kenobi's failure.
One more very quick point on this. I'm just curious if anyone ever talks about, did Shmi or Owen or any of the people actually do something wrong to the Tuskens maybe? The Tuskens aren't vindictive by nature. I feel like they only interfere when people are interfering with them. So I'm just curious if something else went down that was never discussed.
I mean, it's very possible. I think it's also just the whole idea of, we heard it in one of the stories we read on our members section, but how the Tuskens are this is our land. The sand is something we know and understand in a way you outsiders could never, and it's a fundamental insult to try to farm moisture from this place that is made to be the opposite.
Fair point.
I think that's very true. I think it's also one of these things where something hasn't aged well, in that today I think a lot of us have a real understanding of, the evils and awfulness of colonialism, and that, but I grew up hearing stories about, using not the word Native American, but, the savage red man. I don't even want to say that online. The savage, whatever, descriptive, pejorative word you want to use for Native Americans, and how they would murder settlers and how they would do all these terrible things. And I think that 20 years ago, when this movie was made, that attitude was still much more prevalent. We were starting to have a better understanding. Things were starting to change. I remember my high school, a few years before this, had been starting to talk about maybe we shouldn't celebrate Christopher Columbus. But in most of the world, most of the country, this country specifically, that wasn't a conversation being had. And so I think later books have given some of those explanations in important ways. But I think at the time this was made, I think they were just the Tuskens are basically the American natives. We can tell a story where they're being brutal and terrible to the white woman because that's what they do, Yeah.
I think that's fair. I think it's just set up as a plot point without thought of the Tuskens as a people.
Yeah.
But
Right,
it's well, these are the people we've seen, shooting at pod racers. These are the people that, kidnapped, Luke or whatever, or knocked out Luke, Yeah. I think it's just a plot device.
Fair.
And Anakin certainly feels that way. And again, a person who grew up on a colonialist planet, maybe I can understand it, but what he says is, they're like animals, and I slaughtered them like animals. Which, to me, is the moment when Padmé should run like hell, but putting that aside. Let's move on, as you requested, from the romance. We should. We spent way too much time on it. This is already a long episode. Why is Kaminoan security so incredibly bad? And why did Master Sifo-Dyas or Tyrannus, when talking to, Jango, never say that, oh, by the way, if some other Jedi happens to turn up here, don't tell them everything because they don't know about this? Or why didn't they at least... Because again, if I walk into a bank and I start talking...
The plan. The plan was to be discovered.
Okay,
the plan...
That's fair. Okay, you're right. You're right. Okay.
I think that the entire purpose, not to shoot you down in any way, Mads, but I do think the purpose was that like we delete it from the archive, so they don't find it for a while. But when the time is right, we want the Jedi to serendipitously find this, so they trust using the army. The Kaminoans tell them seemingly everything, but they withhold this one crucial piece of information that they only can discuss with Dooku, Tyrannus, Sifo-Dyas, / and that is what makes the Jedi trust the army enough to use it, and also like they are genuinely surprised, and Dooku can say like, "Oh, look at this army that just appeared. The Jedi have been planning to fight for so long." I think that was all part of it, and the Kaminoans were just like, whatever.
I'm so mad that you guys are taking away all the reasons I don't like this movie. Because you're totally right. I just remembered that wrong. We headcanon a lot of the other stuff. I think we're headcanoning pretty hard, but no, everything that the Kaminoans do makes total sense. Never mind.
Yeah. While we're on Kamino, though, let's talk about Jango. Like, underrated king.
Yes.
In my opinion. I'm obsessed with Jango Fett. I feel like he was not given the respect on his name he deserves. Just having his head snapped off, really sad. Really rough for Boba. Totally understand his arc later in the Clone Wars when he goes bad shit. Like, one
of the best villain origin stories told in 10 seconds that I've ever seen. Like,
yeah. Like, and it's such a minimized story in the movie, but it's something that, having loved the Republic Commando books so much, and it's something we've talked about in our members section, but they talk a lot about Jango and Boba, but mostly Jango, and like this idea of like he just wanted a son.
Yeah,
he's a bounty hunter trying to get a quick buck, and all he asks, like, he wants money. He could have like kept going off on all these outrageous requests. You know, it's like the Jedi are hiring him, like, well, through whatever, you know, like he could have asked for anything, and all he wanted was a son. He's like, yeah, give me my bag. I'll stay here on this planet as you request, and I just want a kid. Yeah. Like, I don't believe in any way that Jango Fett is a bad person.
And he was also,
I mean, as much as you can say that about a bounty hunter, I suppose.
I mean, Jango was I consider him to be one of the pioneers of Death Watch to a degree, in that, like, he was, and confirmed in the Book of Boba Fett show, his chain code is in the armor. Like, he is a Mandalorian who was a warrior, and I believe became disillusioned with the way that Duchess Satine and the way that the planet was being run. So he went out into the galaxy, tried to make his own way. And you're right, he not only did he want a son, but he wanted a Mandalorian, purebred Mandalorian son, and didn't think he could get that, I guess, from where he was.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think Jango's cool, and Jango Fett and Slave One, and that gave us one of the greatest noises in Star Wars.
Oh, the seismic charges are badass.
Seismic charges, but that sound, I can hear that sound with no other context, and I'm 7 years old again watching the movie on my couch. Yeah. Like, it's just instant.
Have you guys had a chance to see this movie in a big theater?
No.
I have once.
Every now and then they bring it back. You absolutely have to, because I was pretty bored by the time we got to that, sitting in the theater. And then that moment happened, and I literally felt pressed back into my chair. And like I talked about that happening when I watched Return of the Jedi when I was 6. I was 23 when this happened, and still it was like I've been to see like huge rock concerts, you know, and it felt like that. Like, it was just such a piece de resistance move. And I made a joke about Boba Fett's origin story being 10 seconds long, but actually, like, look at this little kid, like, chuckling and laughing as they're blowing up some other guy. Like, it's presented...
He's a little psycho on it.
Yeah! And you're like, oh...
Get him, Dad, get him!
Like, there's a part of me that's supposed to be like, haha, look, this is how he becomes Jango Fett, how he becomes Boba Fett. There's a part of me that's like, I've read about child soldiers in our own world and what happens. Like, this is a kid with severe trauma issues. And of course he goes out to who he is. And it does not help that, like, granted, Padmé's never near him, but yet again, another character who looks a hell of a lot better than Anakin does in this movie. Tamora Morrison is still today, and was especially then, very nice to look at. And he, like, the way he does that little spin with the gun, like, oh, piece de resistance.
Yeah, it's...
My take is Mace Windu didn't have to kill him, and that was very not Jedi of him, and very hypocritical of him.
Yeah.
He had broken, he had fully gotten rid of the jetpack.
Yep.
He had cut off Fett's arm. Stop there. He can't do anything else. I understand you're in the middle of a battlefield and you can't wait to take him into custody.
I mean, clearly you may not have watched this far again because he's actively shooting at Mace.
Yes, but in one move, he cuts off his arm, and then Mace spins around dramatically to cut off his head.
Oh, as you were saying. Yes, you were saying.
So, like, cut off the arm, yes, great, disarm him. But then why do you gotta follow through with the decapitation?
I mean,
and you see the head shoot out of the mask? God damn, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, I think it's the type of thing that can be explained as like a rush in battle, you know? But it's not Jedi-like. You know, this entire scene of a battle is not what the Jedi were made for. Why do you think so many Jedi are getting mowed down by fucking droids?
Yeah.
Like, they weren't prepared for this.
Yeah.
Like, they fight each other with other lightsabers. That's how they spar. Like, they are not... And that's the whole thing, is that they are not warriors. They are not meant for this. They don't have the critical thinking skills in the heat of battle to say, I don't have to kill this guy right now. Like, I totally have him beat.
Yeah.
It's just like, let's go.
And I'll say,
If people are shooting at me, I'm a kill.
Rise of the Red Blade the book does such a phenomenal job of showing just how traumatic it was for the Jedi because they were so not used to this. And seeing, like, more Jedi die, like, in combat than had ever happened in, like, you know, thousands of years, you know, on one day. And the whole warfare of it being just so not what they were used to. Yeah, no, I buy all that. And so here's maybe one more part where I first had been like, Jango's not very good at his job, but maybe here this was the intent. Did Tyrannus tell Jango to make sure Padmé is killed? Or did he tell him, make sure that the Jedi have to protect Padmé? Because if you are told that you absolutely have to kill someone, hiring someone who is then going to use a droid...
No. Hold on.
That is then going to use a robot of some kind. That is then going to release poisonous caterpillars.
It is a Matthew. I need to lay this out. I have this written down. It is a 6 stage operation. Palpatine approves everything. It is Palpatine to Dooku to Jango to Zam to a droid to 2 freaking little worms. Like, there is absolutely no need for that.
So was it always the plan not to kill like that? They never intended to actually kill Padmé. The plan is to put Padmé in danger so that Anakin will have to get involved and you can put Anakin and Padmé together.
I think that it didn't matter if she lived or died because Palpatine knew eventually she could be killed and dealt with. I think that they did genuinely try. And it used to piss off Dooku. I think that's the thing they couldn't succeed in that. But I think that if Padmé had gotten killed in that arena, it would have just sent Anakin over the deep end, maybe even earlier. Like I think that like for Palpatine,
right, the
timing worked out. But I think that losing people that was close to him was always part of the plan. So it was just kind of whenever we can get her dead. Mm-hmm. Great, and to be fair, she pissed off Palpatine maybe even more. She thwarted him so many times. I'm sure Palpatine wanted her dead really badly. So I don't know. I think that it was I think there was an intent to actually kill her.
It's just not the best plan.
It's a stupid plan.
So here's the thing: is like,
yes, the plan?
Intent. No, I don't think I'm going to defend the plan. It's a dumb plan. But, like, if the plan is that the Jedi need to find Kamino, well, then they need something to lead them to Kamino. What do they need? The bounty hunter's, like, assassin dart. Mm-hmm. How does that happen? It only happens if Zam dies. Zam was never meant to live, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, totally agree.
Because if the caterpillars succeed, there's nothing leading to Jango. Jango. Yeah. There's nothing leading to Kamino. Like, then all of it is for naught, other than congrats. Now Newt Gunray is happy. You know, like I kind of feel like it's a plot device that, the puppet master is using. Like, here, the Trade Federation, these big, powerful people I want on my side, they want this senator dead. I need to get the Jedi to find this place. How am I going to do that? I'm going to find the right bounty hunter. I'm going to have him find another bounty hunter. Like, it's all convoluted, but to me, it makes sense.
Do you think that Palpatine intended and ordered, or Dooku ordered Jango to use a Kaminoan dart specifically to lead them back? That would be next level. I mean, like, why else would you be using Kaminoan dart, I guess? But, like...
Yeah, I mean, it makes no sense that... Yeah, I think that's a given, because I think there's no other reason why Jango would use that. Like, he doesn't need... A Mandalorian does not need to get weapons from the cloning people.
Well, I mean, he has been living there, it looks like. So maybe he just lived there long enough, or he was using
It could go
their
either way, I
technology.
feel like, yeah.
Yeah, well, and I will say one other thing, which is that the movie does... Like, and this kind of goes to our earlier discussions. The movie does make clear that Dooku has no idea that Anakin is part of Sidious's plans.
Right.
So in that regard, the idea that Jango may think this plan's going to work, Dooku may think this plan's going to work, but Sidious is... Well, but Sidious wins either way, because Sidious probably thinks no matter what, Anakin's going to survive, because I think Anakin is, the bestest there's ever been a bestest. And... So he knows that if Padme lives, we put them together, and that causes problems. If Padme dies, then I've now killed both of the people who Anakin has strong attachment to, and he's going to come right to me.
Right.
Okay,
So,
well, I have a question here. Do you guys think Palpatine, in this moment, knows what Padme means to Anakin? Like, does he actually? Because, like...
I think
by the time they end up in the Geonosian ring, all of the romance has happened in a space where they've been removed from everyone else.
I do, because it is Palpatine's idea. He's just like,
True.
What if it's Obi-Wan Kenobi? Like, and he doesn't say Anakin, but he says Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah.
And granted, like, I agree with you. I don't think the books do it. I don't think this does enough to show that. And a lot of it comes from the extent the Legends canon, where it's really lets clear that Anakin has been meeting with Palpatine this whole time, and that Palpatine can sense things in Anakin that no one else can.
I agree with that. I think that, like, the meetings have been happening. Anakin's been expressing those emotions to Palpatine. I think Palpatine did this all on purpose.
I mean, Palpatine also knows people. I think one of the things that this movie really brings out, well, God, you guys are making me like a lot of parts of this movie. And I do. I always said I think this movie moves the plot along in very good ways. I think it's a very good story told by a very bad storyteller. But the story elements it adds are fundamental to the story. And I think part of what it sets up is that the Jedi, because all of the Jedi cut themselves off from their most of their emotions, they don't understand emotion. And so it may be that none of them understand how much, when Anakin's taken away from his mother, here's another woman who is older than him, he's going to imprint on her like a baby duck. And I really like the idea that Obi-Wan doesn't really realize that, and Yoda doesn't realize that, but Palpatine does. So it may be that Palpatine doesn't know that Anakin feels this way, but he thinks it's very likely that he does, and especially if he brings her back into his life. Like, I don't like the idea of Palpatine who literally made every single thing happen, because then I think there's no agency. I'm more like the idea that, again, some of the Legends books set up of he knows people enough that he knows if I put these people in this situation, something will probably happen that will be good, and like, because again, Darth Plagueis sets up, he wanted the Trade Federation to take over Naboo, but he'd set it up in a way where like, oh, they didn't? Okay, I can still make this work. Mm-hmm. All right, well, there's more to talk about, and I want to keep going with some stuff, but Alex, I know you need to go soon, so why don't we just give a couple of your last quick hits?
I really only have two things on my list, and one is that this movie truly gave birth to the memes, and the meme culture of the prequels. This movie is where it took off. I mean, the amount of times that I quote to my friends playing video games, he went completely the other way, or or like if I'll be playing let's say I'll be playing a game of Call of Duty with some friends, and my friend will be like, all right, let's go in together, and I'm like, no, I'm going in now, and I'll just run in by myself just for the bit sometimes, because of just some of the memes that were created from this movie. And I think that's a really big positive. Is this movie did. I think that meme culture existing and being so prevalent in young people brought more people to watching the movies, and I think brought more appreciation for them in a weird, like, roundabout way.
Nice.
I agree.
I agree with that.
And the only other thing I had down was that I really, and I'm curious what Matthew has to say about this more than even what I have to say about this, in that how you imagined Yoda fighting when you saw Yoda fight. Because, like, as a kid, I thought it was cool that, like, Yoda had all these crazy force powers and was flying around like a frog on ketamine and just, like, you know, Dooku being so elegant and seeing the masterful lightsaber dueling and seeing, like, how much better he was than Obi-Wan, who defeated Maul, and seeing Anakin's, you know, being able to hold his own longer and still, you know, losing because he's inexperienced, but being like, it kind of gave you glimpses into each of these characters' skill sets and potential and mindsets. And I thought it was very cool and very, like, cerebral of a fight. And also noting that Dooku chose not to actually, you know, he probably could have killed them. I know there's that dramatic scene where he holds his lightsaber over his head, but I don't think he was ever going to actually, like, kill one of them in that moment. I think that it's just still a moment where Dooku was still, like, had some of the Jedi tendencies to not fully murder. But all that to be said, I'm curious, especially with Matthew, what you think about how Yoda's lightsaber combat was portrayed.
The little green ball of ableism, you mean?
Yes, that. Yeah, ketamine frog.
I'm incredibly biased on it because it made me so angry.
Yeah.
Because, and granted, like, you know, I became disabled, like, I've been mentally disabled for a long time, but I lost my leg in between seeing Attack of the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. Attack of the Clones was one of the first movies I went to in a wheelchair. And Yoda, but, you know, I was the fat kid in high school, in elementary school. I was the kid who was always picked last in gym class because I wasn't very physically capable. And Yoda, to me, was my hero because he showed that you could have a body that was not great by the standards of everyone around you, but just because of the power of your mind and the power of your spirit and the power of your heart, you could still do incredible things that had nothing to do with the capabilities of your body. And so this is my feeling. I'm not using this to say this is how you should feel. I'm saying this as a newly disabled person who had held on to that idea of Yoda. And then when I was coming to terms with living my life without my leg, Yoda was someone I really held on. I felt so personally betrayed. It is probably the single moment where I have felt ableism most in my life. And so, yeah, I think there are ways they could have, I think the implication is supposed to be that basically he summons the Force enough to kind of, you know, the way like adrenaline can make you kind of like forget the fact that you've been shot and do incredible things. I could buy the idea that summoning the Force makes you able to do these incredible feats and that you're totally exhausted after. And if they'd explicitly said that, I would have been like, okay, I wish you hadn't done that with Yoda, but you gave me a reason to understand it.
Well, what if it's... Sorry, go ahead. Instead
of just saying it that, like, just the way it showed, I was deeply personally offended and really hurt.
Does it... And I don't know if it does. You know, does the idea that, like, Yoda, you know, Yoda uses the walking stick. Yoda is slow moving. Yoda does, like, I think, appreciate, you know, the how taking it slow and leaning into his age really helps him, I think, in a lot of situations. But, you know, does it help at all that, you know, I always interpreted it as like he's using the Force to overcome physical limitations, and it's like he's using it to enhance, you know, his own abilities. And I don't know if that makes it better or worse.
Again, if it had been set up in any way,
yeah.
I still think I still think it would have been bad, and I would have hated it because I think it's not who the character is. But it would have been like, well, here's the other reason: if you do it in order to give me a lightsaber duel that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life as one of the best in Star Wars, great. But I think Ketamine Frog is the worst lightsaber fight in all of Star Wars.
It is rough.
I think it looks awful and CGI'd, and I felt insulted. I felt like you're going to take away this disabled character just to give me this schlock? Like, again, I'm not saying that I'm having the most rational reaction to it. I'm getting like, I can feel myself getting upset talking about it. So I'm not saying that like everyone should have the reaction I do by any means, but I've certainly talked to a lot of other disabled people who have similar reactions of it. Just felt incredibly ableist and like a real betrayal of what the character had been, and not for any good reasons. And when you pair it with like the green puppet, who I've known to love, who for some reason they made CGI this time, watching a lot of this, part of me was thinking, this is what happened when Jim Henson died. That, you know, Henson had been a real partner with George Lucas in the original movies, and I think he got puppets in a way that many people don't. And I think the misuse of them and turning it all into CGI, I think Jim Henson, if he'd still been around, could have been like, George, what are you doing? Right. But awful lines, like, I mean, oh God, what's his name? The guy who plays Count Dooku.
Christopher Lee.
Christopher Lee, you know, I've seen him do incredible and I've seen him do incredible acting, even in pretty schlocky dialogue, like some of the original Dracula movies. I've never heard him utter a line as bad as, clearly we are equals in powers of the Force. We must settle this with lightsaber. Like, no one talks like that. And his delivery to me was the most like F you to Lucas, because I don't think that's a good delivery at all. Yeah, I just hate every moment of that. I respect what you're doing. I'm going to ask that you don't try and find a way to make it okay, for me at least, because I need people to respect that it's just horrifically insulting scene. And if other people like it, that's awesome. And I think enjoying it as the green ball of ketamine is great. But I'm just saying, like, for me, don't try and tell me a reason why it's okay.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I appreciate you speaking your truths, because like these are things I never would have thought of, like, as, you know, which makes me ableist in some sort of a form. Like, that just doesn't affect me, so it hasn't occurred to me, I guess I would say. And so I do really appreciate you like saying that, because like, yeah, when I was a kid, it's like, even just watching like the first episode of the Clone Wars is like, oh yeah, Yoda's so cool, like he took down like all these droids by himself, but it's like, it never occurred to me the bastardization of the character that occurred in that way.
And I don't even think that's ableist of you. I think that's the importance of different voices. I mean, I didn't like Anakin's romance scenes, but I don't think I truly understood how manipulative it was. And especially, I don't think I caught the victim blaming of it, of the whole, you know, that kiss you shouldn't have given me, until I read a set of tweets by a woman talking about that. And because she saw it, because she's like, this is how I get treated every day. And I was like, oh, yeah. Like, so yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with you not catching that. I think we all catch things because of our own experience. But yeah, so I will say, though, one positive thing about that lightsaber fight, and part of why I dislike that part, is I think the later part of it, when Dooku is fighting Anakin, it's not that the fight is that good. It's that they move into this very dark area where they're both so clouded in shadow and their faces are just lit by these red and blue blades, and is just so beautiful, and so, like, talking about these two Jedi who have both fallen or in the process of falling, and I just loved it so much.
I did notice that too. It is pretty visually stunning. Like, it hadn't stuck out to me before, but I was like, ooh, the lighting is really doing something for me right now. Like, it's really telling the story. Yeah,
it really is. It really is. We've gone a long, long time. And I know Alex has to go really soon. So, Erin, what are your last things?
Last few things. Just gonna say it. Like, I love monsters, okay? Like, I love a good monster fight. I think it's so fun. Love the Geonosius battle. Geonosa. I don't know how to do this, guys.
Geonosian.
Sure, thank you. And for me, just overall in this movie, as an Ahsoka stan in every way, shape, and form, I had so much fun watching Barriss.
Yeah.
And I had this time to think to myself, okay, this is Attack of the Clones. Anakin is a Padawan. Barriss is a Padawan. Like, I knew she was older than Ahsoka, and I know that Anakin is very young when he takes Ahsoka on. But it just kind of, like, drives it home a little more how she could become so disillusioned in her time as a Padawan, because she was there before the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Ahsoka wasn't. She knows what it used to be like. Ahsoka doesn't.
Yeah.
And, like, yeah, they have this beautiful connection, you know, early on in the Clone Wars, but, like, at the end of the day, Barriss is very unsatisfied with the Jedi.
Yeah.
And in a way that Ahsoka doesn't see. And so it just, seeing her on the field at Geonosis, like, it wasn't even that she was a part of the Order when it happened. She was there.
Yeah.
And it makes Barriss's story of her disillusionment and the fall of the Jedi so much more powerful and meaningful to me.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. I did not even notice her, but I totally believe you that she was there, and I think next time I'll watch it, which will hopefully be a little while.
Sorry.
I would say that I would look for it, but yeah, go ahead.
She's actually there in the scene when Padmé first comes to Coruscant. And she's there talking.
Okay.
Like, the scene all the Jedi are in with Palpatine, and she's standing in the background.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so Barriss is included in the movie, which I like a lot. The clones. Shout out to my boys.
Yep.
Shout out to my boys. I don't know if this is true. I don't know if we know this, but my personal belief is that clone commander we see with the yellow markings is, in fact, Commander Cody. He sounds like him. He acts like him.
Yep.
Like, he's immediately on top of it, like Mr. Perfect Boy. He's like, sir, let me tell you, we've set out this perimeter, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Just love him, love the clones.
Like, one thing I noticed this time is how much, like, okay, the clones are taking orders from Yoda. Mace has never seen them, and they've never seen Mace. They take orders immediately from Mace. Like, you can see how much they've been programmed and taught to any Jedi to take orders from them immediately.
And that's why, like, when Anakin and Obi-Wan are fighting, Pilot, put it down. Pilot, don't do that. Pilot, do this. And I'm just thinking about this poor guy sitting in the cockpit, like, who am I supposed to be listening to right now?
Yeah. He probably has no idea who... I mean, or maybe they do. Maybe they've been shown pictures of, like, these are the generals. These are the Padawans, you know?
Like, I envision him, like, swerving the plane around and being like, put it down, keep it up, put it down, keep it up.
Yeah.
Of course, that doesn't happen in the movie, but...
Yeah.
That and just justice for the clone that falls with Padmé that nobody gives a shit about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Padmé, no!
Well, and I think that's the whole point. I do love that scene again as an illustration of, like, your job is supposed to be to care about people, not an individual person. And I think there's a problem with that, in that if you have to care about people and also, like, individual persons and people, and they're each the two different sides. I will say that brings up my one other big complaint in terms of, like, the gender stuff about this movie. I will admit, Natalie Portman is a very attractive woman. Seeing Natalie Portman's midriff is not something I thought I would ever feel bad about. But even at, like, 22 years old, with all the hormones that a 22-year-old, you know, person who was, you know, thought they were a boy at the time had, even I was like, don't pander to me like that. When the monster reaches up to claw her, and somehow, like, two of its claws cut through her shirt, but the other part of its claw perfectly rips her shirt to turn it into a crop top.
Yep.
Like, it was just like, like, again, at that age, you find a way, an excuse to show me more of an attractive body, I'm probably not complaining about it. The fact that I complained about even that, I was just like, this is just so blatant. Come on.
Yeah. And, like, you know for a fact, so much of it is also marketing. Because is there a single photo of Padmé in her full flight suit with the white robe? No.
Nope.
There's not a single one. As far as, like, marketing that's been put out everywhere, it's Padmé in her white, newly cropped top.
Yeah. And, like, I know an awful lot of cosplayers who, and they always, now that I think of it, I don't think I've ever seen the full one. And, you know.
I have, actually.
Oh, have you? That's awesome.
I do know several female cosplayers who do the full one intentionally.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, like, I know some, a cosplayer who I follow has recently she made a big deal about how, get ready for it, everyone, I'm doing Return of the Jedi Leia. And, like, a lot of her fans got super excited because she's a very attractive woman, and she often posts cosplays that are very attractive, and she did it as the bounty hunter.
Yeah.
And it was a great way to weed out. She just started blocking any guy who was pissed. It was like, you thought I was going to do one of thousands more of Bikini Leia. No, I'm Leia at her badass.
Yeah, it's Bushk.
Yeah, Bushk, exactly.
Or, like, even, like, Endor Leia. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. She really played them.
Exactly. All right. Well, this has gone on for so long already. So I'm going to wrap this up. We are going to have the member bonus section where we talk about what I think we're all kind of agreement is one of the best, if not the best story we've read so far in A New Hope from a certain point of view. But if you're not a listener, thank you as always so much for listening. You can check out all the amazing things that both Alex and Erin are doing in their links are in our show notes. You can, of course, find all the things that I'm doing by going to theethicalpanda.com or by going to our page on True Story. And most importantly, there you can find ways to become a member. $5 a month. You become a member, you get bonus content, you get ad-free content, and you get bonus full episodes that are just for you as members. So please think about doing that. If you're a member, stick around for a bonus content. For everybody else, thank you so much. We have spoken. Are you okay to go a little longer, or do you need to get out of here?
Yeah, no, I had nothing to say for my outro.
Oh, it's totally fine. Do you want to?
Mind went blank.
Do you want to say something now, or do you want to just leave it?
I have become more powerful than any Jedi.
I guess that means you're hosting next week.
Yeah!